So welcome to everyone who's joining from near and far. Welcome to folks who are joining us from the YouTube. Happy spring, happy equinox. And this evening, I'm really happy to welcome Ayya Santacitta and some of the wise women from the Vajradakini Sangha and initiate a discussion about our various projects. So Ayya Santacitta, her current art project is the Aloka Earth Room. And maybe you can wave so people recognize you. And Peggy Walsh Craig is chair of trees for Nipissing and Nipissing Environmental Watch.
Is that a town or something?
That's a town it's a college in Canada.
Okay.
And Annie Wadleigh is coordinator of Portland Pollinators, and Maureen Goronson runs Goronson Farm. So welcome to our equinox event. I'm thrilled we can all be together. I'd like to start setting the intention with the 4 immeasurable prayers, which many of you are familiar with. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. And when we say sentient beings, we're essentially saying all of life. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness which is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. So first, I'd like each person to talk a little bit about their wonderful projects. And Ayya Santacitta, if we could begin with you and the Earth Room.
Sure. Good evening. I spoke a little bit already yesterday, and quite a few of you have been here, but some not. So you might just hear it twice. So I'm gonna start at the beginning a little bit. My first teacher was a Thai forest master from the south of Thailand, and when I came to his monastery, his name was Ajahn Buddhadasa, and when I came to his monastery for the first time, 1988, to my utter surprise, there was an art gallery in that monastery, which was quite, in the middle of nowhere in the jungles of South Thailand. And that art gallery was called the Spiritual Theater. And there were paintings in that gallery, mainly Zen style paintings, which he and the monks who lived there used to illustrate, certain concepts like the Noble Eightfold Path, the Four Noble Truths, and other Buddhist concepts. And I thought that was a really brilliant idea. And as I've myself, been in the arts when I was young, I just thought this is a very interesting thing, which I would, when I'm ready to, I would like to do something like that, an updated version of that. And the Aloka Earth Room, which I'm currently working on, it's in San Rafael. This is on the north end of the Golden Gate Bridge. It's a very close, maybe 16 miles from San Francisco. It's in a small house in a dead end street in a very quiet area, but only 15 minutes from public transport, and very easy to reach also from town. And so I'm going to start to have the first iteration of the Aloka Earth Room, which is, as the name says, geared towards having a conducive environment for practitioners to, to start investigating that part of our experience, which is still not really, deep enough integrated, because if it would be, I think we would see much more significant change. So there's still a lot of work to be done, and I know that all of you, or many of you, are already working on this. And I hope that this Aloka Earth Room will be an environment for people to practice together and to also sit together in council and to listen to each other and support each other to integrate more deeply the information which needs to be integrated so that we can really effectively respond, and also integrate and work with the multiple crises which are actually together leading to this situation we are in. And I don't think that the planet itself is in a crisis, but we are in a crisis. Our species is in a crisis, and there's so much for us to learn, and to have dedicated spaces for learning together, I think, is very important, online and also also in person. Both is important. And using art as a means, to oil the wheels, I think is very close to the Vajrayana approach anyway. There's so much art which is used, to kind of inspire the imagination. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to inspire our imagination to think in very different ways, because we can't really fix the problem from inside the old view of looking at things, but we need to be inspired to digest more deeply what has come before us, and then from that deeper understanding respond in ways which are more real, and which are expressing our understanding that we are actually part of the planet and not masters or directors. We need to give up that illusion, really. And that's something which is very hard, especially for white culture, and mostly here in that call, most people are white, I think, or many. And we have an extra big learning curve to take, I think. And yeah, it's a lot, and it's very important to do it together, because that's the only way I know how that can happen. Such a big shift, which is kind of knocking on our doors in so many ways. So I think that's all I wanted to say. And
you were going to share a quick photo.
Oh yeah. Yes, and I can share maybe 2 photos actually with you. So for those who haven't seen them yet. And I also put a link into the chat for those who are interested to see a little bit more about the process of the Earth Room, how the whole thing came together. So I'll show you the photos. And it's not finished yet. The opening is April 21st, 22nd, 23rd, so, but it's pretty much finished. So that's the room. The pedestals are still empty, but I'm gonna have like a Prajna Paramita statue on this one, on the empty one, and the paintings on this clay paint, which has been locally made, and those shapes on the walls are like the half-closed eyes of a Buddha, or maybe like the raft which is helping us, to set over to the other shore. and also constellations maybe, and on giving the impression, you know, of being in a cave and looking out, and at the same time also being looked at. And then I have a second photo to stop sharing and then do the second one, which shows me with a visiting nun from Europe, actually, on that second photo. So I hope you can see that. And you know, I hope that this will be a conducive environment for daring to imagine different ways of looking at our experience in this, on this evolutionary threshold we are all together, and using it as a opportunity, really, rather than, you know, getting completely discouraged by the situation. That's what I'd like to help with this room.
Thank you, wonderful. And Annie, how would you like to describe your work with Portland pollinators?
Unmute, Annie.
There I am. It wasn't allowing, yeah, perfect. So my name's Annie, and in 2014, some friends and I had the idea, mostly inspired by bees. It all started with bees and being inspired by bees and this vision of creating these pollinator corridors. You know, I live in Portland, Maine, which is actually has a lot of green space, but also has a lot of buildings. And at the time I was living in a neighborhood in Bayside, and there's a whole trail that goes through there, and there was this vision of creating these pollinator corridors. And I can't say that we fulfilled the entire vision that we had in our heads, but we started this organization, Portland Pollinators, and basically the idea is to educate people and teach them. And I was educated as well, because when I started, I naively thought you plant a bunch of flowers, the bees come, and it's great. And it turns out, you know, well, that's true, but some plants are better than others. And the more you can use native plants to it's called rewilding, actually, rewild your own area, the better off the whole ecosystem is through that. And we planted a couple of demonstration gardens, which are both going strong today. And one of the ones, when we were planting it, there were bees actually flying onto the plants as we were planting them. And so it was the most gratifying work really. And we also have partnered with different people and created a community pollinator guide, how to start your own garden, and also some information sheets about what to plant. And we would go to events and hand out literature. We have a website, try to educate people different things. And there's another organization called the Wild Seed Project here in Maine that's statewide. And they are actually doing many of the things we started out to do, but even more, with workshops and all kinds of events. We also had meetings and showed films and did a lot of different things. We created a Google map on our website to show the areas where there are pollinator gardens with photos and things. And it's really been a wonderful experience, and meeting people, and just I think the best thing is seeing how you can take this very small area and plant these native flowers, see them flourish, and see the birds and butterflies come back. I've lived in Portland 20 years, more than 20 years, 30 years plus. And when I first came here, I remember seeing Luna moths and praying mantis and all sorts of insects. And you don't tend to see those anymore here so much. And so it's amazing just to see the insects come and come back. And we've also been fortunate there's been another group called, what are they called? Portland Protectors, that worked to create a citywide ordinance. It's one of the strongest in the country, a pesticide ordinance to help decrease all the the lawn pesticides and all sorts of things in that area. And I have, in the last 10 years, definitely seen so many improvements in neighborhoods, and people not planting as many exotic orientals that require tons of chemicals and fertilizers, and planting more and more natives. And there's more, it supports the birds and the whole ecosystem. So that's been really gratifying. I also work at Maine College of Art and Design, which is a wonderful interface with the art pieces, and we have a strong public engagement program there. Ken most familiar with that. She was actually very involved with starting those sort of community engagement programs. And so I get to see a lot of art and activism, and it's, the public engagement goes throughout our curriculum. And so there's a lot of community partners and projects involving print, working with different groups. They've been working with some prisoners recently, voting projects, all kinds of things. So I'm really lucky to get to see firsthand all these different sides of art and activism, and how it connects to the bigger world. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Annie. And Peggy, if you'd like to describe your long history with trees. All right. Okay.
There we go. All right. Yes, I will try to condense 35 years into a few moments. So the organization I've been involved with the longest is an environmental advocacy organization. And both of the organizations that I do environmental work with have the word Nipissing, which is an English version of the Anishinaabe word Nipissing, which are the local people and the local biggest lake. And anyway, we're in a small city in northeastern Ontario. So some of the successes we've had in environmental advocacy are a ban on cosmetic use of pesticides, something like what Annie was mentioning. Also, we got monitoring of the groundwater at a new landfill. We helped to create a HAZ waste depot. We work in more recent years on active transportation, water quality, stormwater management, infill development to get more housing closer to the core of the city. And we put out to the city council a green agenda every couple of years, and we try to give them things they can do that aren't hard to do. And we've had some success with that. We also have worked on increasing tree canopies. So then putting my other hat on, and with Trees for Nipissing since 2004, we have had projects such as grandchildren planting trees, naturalization of a former landfill site. We've planted about 500 trees there so far, and expect to be doing more this fall. We have 2 nurseries that we run that provide small trees for groups that want to do tree plant. And also we move those to the second nursery, and that provides larger trees for the city parks. So yeah, it's been a broad bunch of things all over these years. We have, we're a very small group in the advocacy area. The Trees for Nipissing group, we don't do advocacy so much except for increasing tree canopy. But the Nipissing Environmental Watch, we have a very, well, we have a good reputation. In fact, the last time we presented our green agenda, the mayor thanked us for being presenting in the way that we do, which is always with respect for the people that we're trying to change their minds. So.
And Peggy, when I was trying to describe to Santacitta the nurseries, do people give you seedlings, or do you get them from the forest? And then how do the trees come to you?
So we were able to get a grant to do the first 2 plantings. So we bought the seedlings. They're all native species from a wholesale nursery in Southern Ontario. So the first time we planted 900, and the second time we planted another 900. So we have capacity, and these are in raised beds. The grant included money to build boxes so that the weeding wasn't so bad because the first time we planted in 2004, we planted directly into the ground, and then we really failed at getting people to come and weed. And these plants are in the growing condition for at least, usually about 3 years. So weeds have a chance to get really well established. So we raise them up in boxes, and it's still not that easy to get weeders, but we still, it is doable now because we have those boxes. So we can always find people to do tree planting, but weeding, not so much.
Could you say something about the integration of the whole community in that waterfront area that worked with so many different facets together of the community?
So there, I'm trying to think how much I can. So one of the main features of our city is a lake that is like 33 miles across and 10 miles the other direction. So it's big. And the waterfront was always cut off from the downtown area by a railway. And so in the late 80s, the city wanted to build a marina and make it look a lot nicer downtown, because before people, so I'm in my early 70s, and people my age, when they were growing up, were told not to go to the waterfront because there were too many scary people down there. So anyway, this project, the city got a grant, and they built a marina, and they built a nice landscape beds, which they didn't have any money to look after. So a friend of mine who had a fitness group, she inspired all these women because it had been neglected for a few years and it looked pretty bad. They took it on to weed these landscape beds and to plant more. So this, at one time they had 400 volunteers.
Wow.
She's very inspiring. So they've been looking after these beds for about 25 years now. And each crew, if you will, or team, they call them, they decide what they're going to have in their beds. There's a mix of trees, shrubs, perennials, and annuals. And so it has become the magnet. Everyone here brings people to the waterfront to have a look. Because there's usually something blooming, and there's a beautiful sculpture that the French Cultural Association put up, which is layers of different kinds of rock, and it's at the top it has a manufactured crystal, and that is to represent diversity of people, and it's very nice. So
Thank you. And Maureen, would you like to talk a little bit about your incredible work with spiritual planting on your farm and many cultures represented in the plantings on your farm? I have to unmute you.
There we go. Great. So, as Kenmo explained, I have the Goronson farm in Scarborough. I and my husband began this farm back in 2014. I had a background in agriculture through my college years and work that I did then. But we started this whole farm here because we were concerned about the poisons that were going into food. So we started out with free range chickens and guinea hens, which expanded to ducks. And then I discovered that I am a fruit grower. I love trees. I just adore fruit trees, and I'm interested in history. So I was interested in growing these trees that have been lost. They've been lost to things like, the fruit is not convenient to ship across country. It doesn't bounce well. So, people are not caring so much about flavor profiles, but more about, does the tomato or does the fruit from the fruit tree, is it able to travel long distances? And in doing this, in doing a lot of research all winter long, because of course, what else do you do in Maine in the wintertime? You do a lot of research, right? Because it's so snowy and you're snowbound. And I discovered history about a lot of these trees. So, we're growing things that, as Kenmo knows, many people discouraged me from growing in the early years, said that it couldn't be done. And for some reason, this land has been very, very good to us. And land really does have a persona, a personality. And it's allowed us to grow things like Chinese honey peaches and apricots from Iran, and Russian plumcots, things that most people, nectarines. And then I discovered that there was a rose, which I had seen when I was living in Paris for a while, and I had seen these roses outside of these pharmacies. It was called a Gallica rose, and it's called the apothecary rose. Those are the roses that are believed to have been used by Nostradamus in his rose petal pill factory. And legend or history has it that people who worked in his factory didn't fall sick with the plague. There was a plague back then. You could say that there's a plague here in modern times. So I think that things really do come back around. One of my CSA customers, who is of the Jewish faith, wrote to me to ask me what I would think of growing etrogs in Maine. Well, I had never heard of them. And down the rabbit holes I went and discovered that this was a tree that is considered very, very important to the Jewish faith. They believe that this was the original tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. It's mentioned in the Bible, a lot of history, and it's also considered to be a healing, produce a fruit that is healing, that was used medicinally for lots of different things. So we started growing them. I did find a rabbi to supervise me, and we're following the old Jewish halakhic agricultural laws. So there are very specific things that we have to do in growing this tree. And I do feel that the old ones knew things that we don't know anymore, that we've forgotten, and that there were reasons for a lot of these things. So of course, to me, I felt if we were going to bother to put all the work into growing these trees, that we had to grow them the way they were meant to be grown and follow these laws, which I don't necessarily understand, but there was a reason for them to begin with. Most recently, we responded to a very, very large, over 100-year-old copper beech tree in Portland at a church, a large church there. the tree had become diseased, so they had to cut it down, and people were heartbroken. They'd, met each other under the tree. There were hearts carved into it and initials. People had gotten married under the tree. And it come to find out, they have a sister city. Portland has a sister city in Japan. And that sister city back in the early 1900s sent 10 of these copper beech trees to Portland, and one of them was planted at this church. So we, when we read what the pastor wrote, we offered to try to grow cuttings for him that they could use then to start more trees to replace this one. So for me, it's been not just a link to nature and thinking about how important nature is to us, but it's connected us to other groups in the community that we wouldn't necessarily have a connection with. And I think that, especially with things like the etrog tree that are so deeply important to the Jewish people and to children, because they have a celebration, Sukkot, in September or October, and this etrog is very, very important. It's one of the 4 species that they carry during that celebration. So to me, there's almost like I guess you could call it the Church of Nature, that incorporates so many things with it, that people's faith, their belief systems, things that give people hope, and also, of course, things that help people when they don't feel well. So things that are medicinal. Somebody talked us into beginning to grow medicinal herbs, and so we've got a couple of areas set aside for that with planting. So I guess this is part of the Church of Nature, I suppose you'd call it. So.
Thank you so much. And I'm trying to bring Annie back in. Let me just take a moment to do that. Okay, Annie, you should be able to start your video yourself now. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay, and so our wonderful panelists were in communication with each other about what they would like the discussion to be this evening. And so having read their discussion, we came up with a unifying question. So I'd like to start with a quote from His Holiness Drikung Chetsang Rinpoche that the minute I heard it, I just found it to be a constant contemplation. All things are interrelated, interconnected, and interdependent. So the first question I'm going to invite you to address is, as Ayya Santacitta said, we are on a threshold of really understanding what this means: interrelated, interconnected, and interdependent. And I'd like to ask you, how has Dharma opened you to see your place in nature as nature, and the reverse, how has nature opened you to see your essential understanding as Dharma? And Ayya Santacitta, if you'd like to begin.
I'm since 1988, I'm in contact with the Dharma, and my first contact was in Thailand with the Thai forest tradition. So that's a Theravada-based tradition, which is very close to nature, where the monasteries are very, very simple, and the monks and nuns live in very in small huts in the forest, and go out on alms rounds in the morning, and otherwise live very close to nature. So I lived like that in Thailand for some years, and then I joined a monastery in England, which was also, based on that approach. And they always had forests, and lakes, and it was quite very, very close to nature. And nature was considered, to be the great teacher, especially the forest. When you go in the forest, what you can see is like impermanence is so present in the forest. You see new little saplings coming up, and then also see big old trees rotting back into the ground. So using nature as a teacher, that's how it all started for me. And the word Dharma actually means, besides other things, means nature or laws of nature. And in the Thai language, the word for natural is Dhamachat. So the word Dhamma is part of the language there still today. And yeah, so, that clear seeing of impermanence, I think it's really the kind of, very easy accessible Dhamma door, I think, through which I've entered into the teachings. And and my first teacher was Ajahn Buddhadasa. He was always, speaking about, for example, when we are looking in the meditation instructions on impermanence, they are ending, first it's about seeing impermanence and allowing that seeing to wash away clinging. And then when clinging has been, let go of to a certain extent, we have more capacity to really see clearly. And if we really see clearly letting go, the mind responds by letting go. And he was always saying, throw it all back to nature, because nature is the rightful owner of all of this. And, this insight into this truth, I think, is even more important now than ever before, because I think, we really need to give up that fantasy of having mastery over the planet or being able to, use it as a resource space. This is just not going to really, this stream is really coming down, grumbling big time, and I'm sure you all know this. And yeah, I think it's, without having a teaching like the Dhamma, I think it would be so much more difficult to open up to the teachings which the planet is giving to us, any minute now. And we need to, ground ourselves and build communities so that we can allow this teaching to really sink in and change us to the extent, that we understand and can live from that place that we are part of the planet. We are not on top of it, going around, just choosing this and not wanting that. But it's a very different situation, and it's an evolutionary threshold, and it's amazing, to be consciously participating in that. I think it's a very potent time, and it's scary, but at the same time also I feel it's also exciting. And excitement and anxiety, they can be quite close, like that sense of uncertainty, because we don't know how it's going to be. Yeah, and without a teaching, it would be definitely much more scary to keep steady with this. And yeah, I think that's my contribution, and looking forward to hear from you.
Thank you so much. And Annie, how are you working with the Dharma and nature to see yourself as nature? Yeah, sorry. I have to.
Thank you. Yeah, so I like the way that that question can go back and forth. How was the Dharma opened you up to see nature? And for me at the beginning, it was the other way around, nature opening me up. I was interested in an early age in philosophy and in reading about different spiritualities. But at the same time, I grew up in Maine, and my aunt lived in the country, and I had a lot of access to experiencing nature and animals and insects. I've always been really interested in insects, and just, think they're really beautiful. And so I always felt the interconnection, but then also the Dharma, to look at how Dharma opens you up. I think a lot of it has to do with death and understanding death and our fears about it. And, a lot of it to me is that we feel separate. We feel separate from nature. And, perhaps that leads to the part where we feel like we're on top and nature is, underneath us somehow, we're superior. I think that's the ego sort of clinging to what we think is a reality and what we think is ourself, and so both the Dharma and spending time in nature, to me, can't help but give you other insights and help you to see how interconnected we are, and also how sort of limited our own vision is in a way. When you start, like in a city, when you walk around, nobody's thinking about the bees and the butterflies necessarily, but when you start seeing the way the landscapes are and what could be done to make the ecosystem better, even in a city, and especially in a city in some ways. And it's a challenge now, even out in the country. A lot of the native plants and flowers that used to grow there. I used to joke that my father would have been really, he would have thought it hilarious that people buy black-eyed Susans and all these native plants and trying to plant them back, because they were everywhere where I was growing up, and they still are in a lot of places. But things have changed so radically, and it's kind of an example of what we've done, the impact we've had. The one thing I will say is that working on these projects does give you hope and optimism when you see these plants growing and you see the bees and the butterflies, and you feel like that you have sort of had your vision open to what can happen. And also, to me, that opens up my own heart and gives me like sort of a meditative place, spending time with these gardens or out in nature, or any part of it. To me, it's the you're experiencing the universe, and also the more you can open up your heart and your eyes to see how interconnected life and death are, it's all great teachings, and a struggle to see those perspectives and to remember them and hold them and not be oblivious and, not be apathetic, and the rest of it.
Thank you, Annie. Peggy, how have these areas evolved your thinking over the years about your place in nature or you as nature? Oh, thank you.
Yeah, well, something like Annie mentioned. I had the good fortune to grow up in a family where being one with nature was assumed, and how humans disrespect nature was commented on all the time. Especially my grandmother on my father's side gave me a book on wildflowers before I could read, but she wanted to make sure that I had an appreciation for that. And when I was 16 and working a first job in a restaurant as the salad girl, and I was describing to my mother about cleaning and preparing boxes and boxes and boxes of lettuce, she said, you know, some people believe that when you rip the lettuce apart, that it screams. So she wasn't saying that because she believed it per se, but I think she was open to that concept. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. When I was 19, I was a back to the land person and tried subsistence farming for a time, and then went into horticulture as a career. So the nature thing came before the Dharma thing for me. So and what I would say about the Dharma is that it is the ground on which I'm able to do advocacy work. Because, you know, a lot of the projects that I mentioned before, we were 10 or 15 years doing that. So it takes time to, I mean, you need something to keep you going and to keep your eye on the ball. So in that way, Dharma has helped me.
Can you be a little more, give a more of an example, let's say, of one of the advocacy projects and how you applied the Dharma?
This wasn't a project that we had planned on taking on, but so I described that we're beside this big lake, and then there's a flat area, and then there's an escarpment that rises up 200 feet above the city, and a developer wanted to build houses up on the escarpment, and we went through the usual channels of working with the city planner and presenting at public meetings about how this was a bad idea. And the outcome was that the city planner would write a policy to protect the escarpment. And we went back and forth and met with him several times, and he assured us that this proposal to develop the escarpment would be part of the new policy, but when it went to council, it was going to be grandfathered in with no controls at all on it. So I went to council, and in the meantime, someone had mentioned that the developer and the city planner were socializing and things like that. So I mentioned this at a public meeting, and within a week, I had a letter threatening me with libel, lawsuit case. And that's when I turned to the Dharma to find a way through this. And of course, met with the other members of the group. And there was a lawyer who offered me advice, 1 hour consultation for free. And so I took her advice and called the developer, who happened to attend the same church as I did. And I said, I asked him what he needed to make this go away. And he said he wanted me to retract the statement. And I agreed to that because I realized that in so doing, I reiterated this first thing that I said completely to all of city council and before the TV cameras, and said what I had said, and that I had been asked to retract it. And so anyone who hadn't heard about it before, they knew it thoroughly by the time I was done. And later on, a couple city councilors said to me, it was obvious he was bullying you. And so it turned out to be a thing that we are remembered for, because we kind of took the high road. So I couldn't have done that if I hadn't had a strong meditation practice.
So, Peggy, are you saying,
so sorry, are you saying that they built the thing on that hill?
Am I saying which?
The outcome, did they build on the escarpment or not?
Yes, but they had to put in more safeguards to so that there weren't consequences for the houses that were below that. And later, quite a few years later, the mayor called me, the mayor who was on the developer side to begin with, called me to say that the developer had gone and cut trees down on city property to get more value out of the lots. And that became a big thing that really made the developer look bad. And the outcome is also that this land was given to 4 siblings, and the siblings were so upset about their reputation being ruined that the family ended up in lawsuits with each other, against each other. Like it, I'm not happy that that happened, but it's, yeah. They had to put, the people who build there cannot build certain things because of the tree cover needs to be preserved there, which wouldn't have happened if we hadn't. So basically the policy that was put in place, the city planner, he put in as many of those things as he possibly could. So.
Mm-hmm. And Maureen, thank you, Peggy. And Maureen, how is the Dharma helping you evolve your thinking about nature and vice versa? Yes.
Thank you. So I'm going to go back to something that Santacitta started with, which was talking about forests, because we're a small farm here, but we've been very, very careful not to cut trees, which, a lot of people are drawn to cutting down the trees and making more room to plant and put in more agriculture. But we've always been very, very hesitant to do that and haven't done it. We feel that that's part of, and we were going on instinct with this, but we do feel that that is part of what has allowed us to move forward with success in growing, because we feel that the trees are protecting this property. They talk about the mycorrhizal network. So trees underground for miles and miles and miles have these networks, almost like a telegraph, where they tell each other things. And if, one plant has a deficiency, it can trade with another plant to get what it needs. And if it doesn't have the means to trade, that other plant will give it the resources it needs anyway. So there's this real interconnectedness with trees and forests that are almost like a model of the way I think we human beings should probably be with each other, more than we are. Through the work that I've been doing, I've noticed more about the awareness or the presence of plants and trees, animals. And I think that's, I don't know which came first, honestly. I heard someone say, Annie, I think it was you that, or maybe it was Peggy, that one thing came before the other. I'm not really sure for me. I think that it has to do with a listening to nature, feeling like we're part of it here, and trying to do what's right, and also in our decision making, listening to what the property as an entity wants us to do here. We had a group. I'm sorry, just going to add one quick thing. We had a group from the Northeast Biodynamics come here 2 springs ago, and they built what they called a sacred cowpat pit. And I don't even pretend to understand everything about it because I haven't studied biodynamics, but it's based on the work of Rudolf Steiner, whose work, I guess, is actually based on Native American tradition. And I could feel that this property was going in a certain direction before that. But that next spring, which was last spring, it felt like there was a buzzing in the property. Out in front of the farmhouse, it was like an airport, pollinators coming in and out. And I mean, all different sorts of pollinators. And so I think that there's an energy, if you just listen, and as somebody else said, not try to control everything, that we need to do the listening, that's part of it.
So before we open up questions to the group, are there questions in what you've heard from each other that you'd like to ask to each other? And you can just raise your hand for me to unmute you. Okay, Annie, you should be okay.
It's not so much a question, but I just wanted to comment to Ayya Santacitta. Sort of like, one thing I really like about the intersection of art and nature and the Dharma is that I don't think there's the typical path of success or judging success or failure. You know, I really feel like it's about the journey and what people learn on the journey. And, you know, art to me too it's about experimentation and evolution and exploration, all these different things that are not your typical, like, you know, was it a success or a failure, and how do you measure the outcomes, and all these things that are like work projects that you do. You know, I feel like there's really a lot of room for inspiration there. And in her project, the Earth Room, I really like that it's sort of, she's created this project, but it has possible mutations or uses, or, you know, I don't feel like it's wed to any one thing that it has to be a certain way. I really admire that.
Thank you, Annie. You know, and thank you also for putting in the link with the mushrooms, because I just looked at it, this virtual reality visitations in the mushroom world. That looks very interesting. Thank you.
And
it's very cool.
You see me turning because I'm turning to look at Ayya Santacitta, who's beside me when we speak. Okay, Peggy, you're unmuted.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say a little bit in reaction to what we've been talking about, that it seems to me that the experience of living through the pandemic has greatly strengthened many people's sense of interconnectedness. And one of the great teachings of the pandemic is that we are called upon to help and rely upon others. In countries where this inclination was stronger before the pandemic, there were significant, as an example, there were significantly lower death rates during COVID. So I think that we've all had a huge lesson in interconnectedness in the last several years.
Truly. Any other questions for each other before we open? Okay, then I'm going to ask now if people would like to write things in the chat box, questions in the chat box for the panel. if you have a question that you'd like to initiate a conversation for any of the presenters this evening. Annie?
Unmute her.
There I go. I just wanted to notice, I looked up Peggy's website while we were all talking, and there's this beautiful poem on there by Gary Lawless, who lives in Maine. And it's just this gorgeous poem. When the animals come to us asking for our help, will we know what they are saying? When the plants speak to us in their delicate, beautiful language, will we be able to answer them? When the planet herself sings to us in our dreams, will we be able to wake ourselves and act?
Thank you, both of you, both for reading it and Peggy for posting it. And when we think of ourselves as a part of nature and listening to the plants, as Maureen was saying, the early Jesuits, when they went to Tibet, they saw that the tree leaves had the syllables on them from the chants, because the chanting and the trees were in such communication, and they marveled that the leaves veins had formed, like the seed syllable hun or oma hun.
Really?
Yeah. Okay, so is it easier for folks to use the reaction button to ask a question? Those folks who are listening today, do you have a question for the panel that you'd like, or something you'd like to contribute, a reflection? I'm unable to see everyone, so you'd have to do the raised hand from the reaction at the bottom or write something in the chat room. Kathy Breen. Okay.
I was listening to people's reflections, and thank you all for sharing your time and the work that you do with us tonight. You know, that notion of being above and, you know, the marionette controlling things, and how each of you spoke about, you know, being in the Dharma, and how, you know, being in nature, and how that all opens up. And I was just thinking, there's no getting out of it. It's like, you know, like, this is it. And, you know, we can't get up. Like, we're in the river. We are the river. There's no getting out of it. And so it's kind of like, wake up. So anyway, I just appreciate that, and the work that you're doing to help wake us up and to respond the way you have, and such wisdom, Peggy. Oh my gosh, you know, and the fortitude. Well done. So thanks everybody for the work that you're doing.
So in some ways, you have brought up many of the topics that we had looked at beforehand, but just going back again, how does the Dharma, art, and activism mutually support each other as deepening agents? How do they go back and forth to take you deeper and deeper? So is there an area of that mutual support of these three topics that you haven't quite expressed in the way you'd like to this evening?
I think, you know, I wanted to, there's also somebody raising their hand, Barbara, but I just wanted to quickly say, you know, it's about, you know, when the so-called afflictive emotions come in, you know, because I think that's the most difficult topic in communities, you know, the personalities, you know, meeting and coming up, you know, against each other sometimes, and how that without, having a good practice, things start to fall apart if it's not kind of been included into the projects. And patience patience is very, very important. And I heard that very well when you were saying, Peggy, with in your story about this, where you had to basically retract your original agenda, but you still, there was still a lot achieved, because you still could communicate the information, and that's probably the most important thing. So, do not be stuck on what it means to be successful. It's probably not, within that old worldview where it's about like that you're getting your way and you're getting something done and so on and so forth. I think that sense of, needing to achieve like a certain linear success, that's the root of the problem itself. So it's a real big opening, of the mind, which needs to go hand in hand with this work, to have different definitions of what success actually is. Yeah. And then Barbara from our...
Yes, I'll unmute Barbara. Okay, Barbara, you're unmuted.
Hi, everybody. I want to thank everybody. It was so inspiring and beautiful. I'm just so proud to be a member of the Sangha. But I do have an interaction with Dharma, nature, and what was the other thing? Well, whatever it was, it's in there. I do my practice sitting next to a window, and I have a little prayer wheel that goes around when the sun shines on it. And I have tons of trees in front of me. And I live in the middle of the city, but I'm so lucky because, I grew up talking to the animals and because I was a loner and I was alone, and they were my friends, So yeah, it would be nothing like a chipmunk's. They're looking at me. They still do. And they're like, I don't know if they understand me, but they seem to. So anyhow, I'm sitting here, I'm doing the practice, and there's this big long branch right out, goes across my window, not close to it, but close enough. And I think it was Salvarja thing. And I know must have been lights flying, and I look and there's all birds on the tree. And it's like, I just only, you know what I mean? Like, oh my gosh, I wanted to stop and take a picture, but I didn't want to stop my practice, and it's just such a wonderful thing. It reaffirms that we're all connected. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for that reflection, Barbara. And, for those folks who are not right in the midst of nature, to know just having a window or a plant in the room, we're not quite on your farm, but we're close to your farm. With one plant, we can be close to your farm wisdom. Again, you have to use the reaction button to see. Peggy, were you? Okay.
A couple things. Yes, the tree in the middle of the city is no less holy than the tree out in the forest. Especially because that one tree can affect so many people that observe it daily. But I wanted to react a little to what Ayya Santacitta said earlier, and which was what she was saying, but this is just a slightly different way, is to not be attached to the outcomes. Because you can't keep doing this work if you're attached to the outcome. You can't keep even growing things, things always turn out differently than you expect, right, Maureen? But I didn't speak at all about art and the Dharma, and I don't do visual or performance art, but the creativity that I bring to this work is in communication. So I'm working on this little thing for our next presentation to council, because they have a lot more incentives for developers to do single family detached sprawling homes on the outskirts, right? And so I plan to say to them that I'm 72 years old and I'm planning to retire from driving sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. And in so doing, I don't want that new house up on the outskirts of the city. I want a nice place, small, environmental, like energy efficient in the heart of the city, so I can walk to where I need to go. So that's where my creativity comes in.
I think there's so many definitions of creativity. Thank you for expanding the definition. And Maureen, you have a lot of art on your farm. How are you seeing the art living with the plants? Yeah. Okay.
So there are certain things that I consider to be art forms, but tell me, you say that there's a lot of art on the farm. What are you referring to that you've seen, that you've noticed?
Well, we had the discussion about the Buddha statue, and then you put the image of the green Tara up, and I started to see things being woven in the farm.
Yes. So we have continued doing that. I myself was an artist years and years ago, so I have lots of paintings and other things that I've done, but now my form of art is in growing these trees and growing this farm and figuring out what needs what to survive. And several people have talked about patience, that if you want to grow fruit, you have to have a lot of patience. And if you want to get the big, beautiful fruit and the beautiful tree, or the beautiful little tiny vineyards, the two that we have, all of that is an art form. Learning how to prune, and that in a way refers to or connects with life, knowing how much to take out of a piece of art, how much to take off of the tree, knowing what to take out and what to leave behind. Again, those are all art forms. I'm not sure I'm really answering your question, but
well, it's almost as though your farm itself is a giant artwork. Where you're putting the roses and where you've chosen the medicinal garden to be.
right. Yes. And again, it has to do with the listening to the property, the listening to the plants, and having a lot of patience. Yeah. And I think that some people from the outside have helped to take it along to where it's going. It's a path. It's a path that we're walking here. And other people are coming along and contributing to the direction, almost like a stream flowing.
And that's a different way of thinking about a farm, isn't it? To see that it's the collective wisdom coming in, participating in the listening, you might say. And Annie.
Yeah, I think too, the art world has changed so much in and of itself. I mean, there's environmental art now. And where I work at Maine College of Art and Design, there's a fall exhibit planned that isn't exactly directly about climate change, but it's about how we treat our relationship with the land. And they're inviting a lot of visiting artists, a real diverse group of visiting artists, some radical artist farmer people, and a lot of cool stuff like that. And once again, I'm really privileged to see some of these partnerships come to fruition. And yeah, I just wanted to mention too, it's really easy to get angry about, the developer, or, the developer that landscapes their stuff with this kind of like hodgepodge of boring stuff that isn't going to help any birds, any bees, anything. But there, that old saying about more flies with honey than vinegar is so true. And, like Maine Audubon here has been working on this bird safe project, which has to do with trying to get people who have large buildings to change. There's some affordable things you can put on your windows, and they actually do a bird count in the spring, and they have volunteers go around and count the migratory bird deaths from these windows. It sounds gruesome, but at the same time, they get important statistics about what birds are being killed and what can, do to help them. And I remember I thought I don't have a lot of time to give to it, but I said, what if I wrote a letter to the paper or whatever? And they said, that'd be great. And I wrote this letter, and there was some anger in it, like, what about these people who don't, it's all glass and they're not doing anything. And the person at Maine Audubon, it was so great, was kind of like, we're trying to be diplomatic and work with these people, so we don't want to alienate them. And I thought, that's so true, and I've seen it with other things too, where people get very angry and vindictive about not enough being done, or people not having the right perspective. So you really have to think about those other people's perspectives and where they're coming from, and what their interest is, and how do you come to a dialogue with them? Because just complaining about them, or their failure to act, or their inaction, doesn't get anybody anywhere. In fact, they don't want to work with you after that a lot of times. So I kind of strayed from the topic there, but I think creativity I called it Dharma diplomacy. All those different factors can make a big difference. And I think environmental art is so interesting, and different approaches people are taking. We have a textile and fashion department, and there's a lot of interest in natural dyes, and when they talk about slow fashion and fast fashion, and how unsustainable the fashion industry is, how many chemicals it uses, and the labor and all of it. I think art really has a lot more focus now on these issues, and helps to bring attention to them, in ways that are really interesting.
It's really wonderful to think of the art college both as a resource and a locus for the same kind of wisdom coming in that we were just talking about in your farm, Maureen. So it's a different way of thinking of organization, whether it's a school or a farm. So again, I invite questions from the listening group. There's a button at the bottom of reactions, and the big one says raise hand. Is there something you'd like to contribute, or a project that you're working on that you'd like to share, or you're very interested in? And Charlie. Okay, you're unmuted.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was a farmer for 50 years, raising wild blueberries. And my wife, of the last few years of that, had horses, and she was a psychologist, and she worked with autistic people out taking them for walks out on the farm and out in the woods. And her religion was nature, and my religion was Buddha nature. And she said, well, nature is nature. And I think that kind of sums up the Dharma for me.
Yeah, That's perfect. Thank you. Any other thoughts or reflections from the listening group? Okay, I'm going to do a dedication. And I'm going to do the dedication, one of the verses from Shantideva that you'll recognize, but particularly for this evening. As earth and the other elements, together with space, eternally provide sustenance in many ways for the countless sentient beings, so may I become sustenance in every way for sentient beings to the limits of space until all have attained nirvana. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase, higher and higher. And Tita, let me find you. Yes, thank you. You're going to give a message from the board.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I'm Tita Wernemann, a member of the Board of Stewards of Vajradakini Nunnery in Maine, and granddaughter of farmers who had a farm for over 100 years in Nebraska. So I remember being very young and being chased by pigs and the smell of tractor grease and manure, which I think is a great smell. On this spring equinox, we are filled with gratitude for Kenmo gathering Ayya Santacitta, Annie Seconia, Peggy Walsh, Craig, and Maureen Goronson, and all of us to learn about the Dharma as an essential tool in this time of climate change, and to hear about these women's actions as Earth stewards. We are also filled with gratitude for your continuing support of Vajradakini Nunnery. Your gifts make tonight's program possible. Help to create vibrant online Sangha that promotes online study and meditation and retreat programs. Donations also help with our annual donation to Samtenling Nunnery in India, which includes our Tibetan Himalayan Nuns Leadership Program, a year-long fellowship for Drikun nuns based at Vajradakini in Portland, Maine. The program develops skills for international leadership and empowerment of Tibetan Buddhist nuns as they lead their nunneries into the future. And His Holiness Chetsen Rinpoche asked Kenmo to lead the planning team for the International Rains Summer Retreat in India. And Kenmo was instrumental in having the Mahayana nuns invited for the first time in 2,000 years. Woohoo! Your support makes this possible. While teachings are offered freely, participants are offered to give the opportunity to give dana, an ancient word meaning generosity, giving, or gift. Press any blue button on the Vajradakini website that says donate today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tita. And thank you, everyone. What a lovely way to begin spring, to celebrate equinox. And I really am so happy to learn so much about these wonderful projects and the gifts that you are bringing through your work, and really your commitment and how the Dharma is supporting that commitment. So thank you, everyone, for coming this evening, and happy spring. We made it through another winter.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Good night.